Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we are going to talk about a really important topic today because we're going to talk about the fact that it's never too late for you to grieve. And when I say that, does that sound kind of negative? It's never too late to grieve. To resolve your issues, to feel better, to be the person that you're supposed to be, that wonderful, fantastic person that you are. And if you've got a loss that blocks that, it's never too late to deal with it, is it, Heidi?
No, and I think that's a positive thing. Because I know that when Scott died, I put my grief on the shelf because I was worried about you and Dad losing a child. And also I was 20 and I wanted to be like a regular 20-year-old. And so I hid my grief from a lot of people and did put it on the shelf. And I like the idea that you can revisit it at any time.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple of guests today that are going to talk to us about this topic. It's never too late to grieve. You want to introduce them, Heidi? And I just wanted to say that one of the reasons we have them on the show today is because they have written a fabulous, or been involved with a fabulous anthology called The Loss of a Lifetime, Grieving Siblings Share Stories of Love, Loss, and Hope. And there's their book. Great
they
new
both
book
have
coming
chapters
out.
in there. There's, I think 26, 27 stories in there from people from all over the world that have had sibling loss.
Yep, absolutely. So introduce our guests. Heidi.
Okay, I love this topic, and our guests know a lot about it because they did put their grief on hold and went and revisited it later. So next to us is Judy Lipson. Hi, Judy.
Hi.
And she's been on our show before.
She has. She's been on our show before. Judy is an Open to Hope writer. Her sister Jane died at 22 in a car accident, and then her sister Margie died at 35 of an eating disorder. So she's lost 2 siblings. She's the author of the award-winning book, Celebration of Sisters, It's Never Too Late to Grieve, and she is the founder of Celebrations of Sisters, an annual ice skating fundraiser to commemorate the memory of her sisters. She serves on the board of the Cope Foundation, and as you said, she has written an essay in the anthology you just talked about. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you for having
Good to
me.
see you
Hi.
again.
It's good to have you on. Next to her is Ona Gritz. Ona is also in the anthology and has written an essay there. Ona also has multiple losses. Her 25-year-old sister Angie was murdered,
Whoa.
along with Angie's husband and infant son. So it was the family, and Angie's sister was pregnant at the time.
And then she had a half-brother die.
Yeah, I said Angie's sister, okay. Angie was pregnant at the time, and Angie is Ona's sister. This is complicated because it's a lot of people at the same time.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, so I want our audience to hear about these
So
losses.
basically, a family was murdered.
Yes.
And then your half-brother died years later. And
Many
we want to
years
get
later.
into that because that was a trigger for her to start
Right.
really dealing with her grief.
Right, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, so
True.
but we will be talking about that. So, Ona is the author of the award-winning novel "Take a Sad Song" and the award-winning memoir "Everywhere I Look." Her essays and poems have been published in numerous places, including the New York Times. So, welcome, Judy and Ona.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us.
It's awesome having you two on the show today. Well, Judy, let's talk about you because for a moment. How many years has it been since your sister died?
For Jane, it's 43, and for Margie, 34 years. A long time.
It's a lot. I just think about sibling loss and how horrific and hard it was after Scott died, and then I think, wow, and then Judy had to go through another sibling loss. A lot.
A lot. Yeah, and it's what you said, Heidi, about, you wanted to be a 20-year-old and not tell people about the loss. And I don't know about you, but I think it's so complicated for us siblings. I know I'm getting a little off topic for a message here, but I think it's so true because I was 25 at the height of my career working at Bloomingdale's, and I never told people that I lost a sibling or.
So you held it.
I held it.
You held it. Yeah.
Exactly.
But then how many years later did your other sister die?
9 years later.
And how did you hold it then? The same or?
I held it, and then of course I think it became more of an identity. Who am I? And that infamous question, how many siblings do you have? That we all kind of cringe. And it really, and then I just kept moving forward on a treadmill, you know, taking care of my parents, being the single mother for 2 daughters, and just kind of squashed the grief. But I think I didn't know what grief was at
But
age
then your
25.
dad died.
My father died in 2011, which was 30 years after Jane died, and that just
And
kind
Jane's the second death or the
of
first?
the first death.
First death, 30 years, and then what, 20-something after the second death? What was
22, 21 years after the second.
So, and that really hit you.
And then I just realized I better start grieving for my sisters, because his death hit me very hard. I was present for the whole process.
So it suddenly hit you harder, even grieving for your sisters after all those years. And we want to get into that. Let's hear Ona's story a little bit and when she got triggered to start the grieving
Again,
process.
Ona is another story here where I'm just like, wow, Ona's dealing with the death of her sister, brother-in-law, baby nephew, and the idea that her sister's pregnant,
Right.
all at the same time.
Right.
And she was your half-sister.
She was my half sister.
And that comes into play a little bit because of your mother's reaction, I think.
Yeah. It was already a complicated family before the murders. And it was already a very complicated relationship. And I'd experienced a lot of loss because we were raised in the same household, but we were raised very differently. I was my mother's beloved child. She took such care of me. She coddled me. She overprotected me. And my sister didn't get any of that. My sister was seen as the wild child. She was not trusted. She, you know, they were always at odds. And so I grew up believing, you know, she's the bad seed. I'm the good girl. I adored her.
Now she's your half-sister. Is she your mother's child or your father's?
So, again, complicated. My mother had another family before we were born,
Oh, okay.
and kept that a secret from us until I was 14 or 15 and Angie was 20, going on 21. We didn't know that our siblings were our siblings. So she, because of decisions my father made, wasn't allowed to raise her own child. And he wanted his own child. And I didn't learn this until I began researching Angie's life.
And this was after your half-brother died?
No, this was, my brother died in adulthood. He was who I had left of my entire immediate family. And that's, when I lost him, he'd been sick for 10 years. When I lost him, and my parents had been gone for years at that point, I was alone with a mountain of losses. And it allowed me to feel the first loss. And to also want to understand this very complicated life that my sister had lived mostly away from me.
Now, one of the things that I'm hearing here, and I'm not sure, let me see if it's right, you didn't have to be a caretaker for anything anymore, and neither did you. When your father died, you stopped being a caregiver. Isn't that what you said?
We were mothers.
You
No,
wanted.
I was constantly a caretaker.
And I mean, after your dad died, didn't you say that you started deciding you were going to take care of yourself?
I started to grieve for my sisters, but I was always a caregiver. I was still a single mother, and
Yeah.
then I had my mother, so I never stopped being a caregiver.
How did you get into grieving for yourself then?
I went to see a therapist, and then through a compassionate friend sibling group, I met another sibling who was in a complicated grief study, and thought, you know, I think that's something that I need to do, and I did that. And then I started the fundraiser in memory of my sister. So it was a very long, hard journey, but probably the best gift I gave to myself. And it's still going on. It never ends. It's
Through a complicated grief group. That's interesting. How about
Study,
you, Ona?
yeah.
How did you do it?
I was already a writer, and I just had this understanding that it was time to learn Angie's story and tell it.
Okay.
what happened is the year that my brother died, a song my sister loved came on the radio. And I had heard it many, many times. But this particular time, this thought came into my mind that I was the only person alive who knew that she had loved it. Burst into tears. And from that moment on, I wanted to know everything I could about her.
What was the song?
My Baby Loves Lovin'.
Wow. So it kind of broke you open.
It did break me open.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Music.
And she had been a runaway because of the difficulties with my parents. She started running away when I was 6 and she was 12.
Wow.
So I think my grief was multiply complicated by the fact that I had been grieving for her from that time, from the time I was 6 years old. She would come back for brief periods and then run off again, and then my parents started sending her away. So part of the problem was when she died, as horrific as it was, it felt like she was gone again. It felt almost familiar, which made it easier to not feel.
It was almost like, okay, she's run away again, she's coming back.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
She could come back. That's interesting. Well, that was pretty high-profile loss. I mean, for your family went through a lot, didn't they, with the newspapers and the news and...
It happened on the West Coast, and we were living here in New York.
Okay.
So I actually, as an adult, went back and sat in front of microfilm for days and days and days, trailing the news coverage, which I had never looked at the time.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
But something else that made it really hard, and I think contributed to guilt I already felt because I was the favored sister, was the fact that I was in California when it happened. I had gone there to visit a friend and see my sister, and my friend and I were in my sister's apartment with her supposed friends who the next morning committed the crime.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
That's disturbing.
So you saw her the night before?
I saw her the night before. I spent time with this couple, and when I couldn't reach her the next day, my reaction was, this is what she does. She disappears.
Wow. Interesting.
Well, and it's complicated because you then didn't have the opportunity in the future to have a different relationship.
That's right.
Like, who knows what would have happened as you got older, and maybe you would have come together more.
That's right. So when I began to write my book, that's when the closest thing to having that relationship back happened.
Wow, writing your book, and then you're doing your ice skating.
The ice skating and writing my book, and when I listened to Ona's book, which is beautifully written, and she's been a poet, and of course I started writing in my 60s, our stories, although different, the parallels and what resonated were so similar that for me, having sort of somebody else who understood it. But the ice skating for me also tied me, like she said, the song to her sister. The skating was something that tied me to my sisters.
Talk about your ice skating, yeah.
So we all skated as girls, and I needed to do something because November is such a challenging month for me. It's my sister's birthdays, the anniversaries, and even when I thought I wasn't really grieving in November, I would, the week up to the anniversaries, I would, have these meltdowns and not understand why. So I wanted to do a fundraiser. So my sisters were fun. They were a lot of fun. They were, great girls. So I decided to do a skating fundraiser, and I'm an okay skater, so I decided to perform, and I did it for close to a decade, and it benefits Mass General Eating Disorder Center in Boston. And I did it for over a decade, and it grew from 50 skaters to 92, and we raised over $80,000. So it's on pause, but I'm going to bring it back next year because I'm going to be 70. So I'm 15 years older, but but
That's
again,
phenomenal what it's doing, because your sister died of an eating disorder, and you raised $80,000 in the skating for the eating disorders.
Right. And like
That's
Ona
amazing.
said, the music, because the songs that I pick are very, one year I skated to Beautiful because both my sisters were Carole King's fans.
I love it.
So music is something that, also binds us to our
I was going to
sister.
ask you what parallels, you were talking about the parallels
Yeah.
between you, so it sounds like one of them is the music.
Well, like Ona said, we both waited
30 years.
30 years. The secrets that, like my parents kept from me. And also the way she said about Angie, like she sort of was losing her because she was always gone, is my older sister Margie had an eating disorder. And, anybody who has somebody who has a mental illness, you're always losing a part of them and you want them to be somebody that you're not. And I don't, and so that piece of it too, because I always knew that Margie was not going to live forever, but even still, losing her was always a shock.
Well, and that's what I read about your sister. You thought, well, eventually, or at least your mom, something's going to happen.
Yes.
So in
Right.
both cases, you both kind of felt like something is bound to happen
Right.
eventually.
That was my mother's reaction when my sister died, was to tell me that a therapist had told her years ago that the way she lived her life, she wouldn't make it to 30.
Oh, wow.
But I was 19.
Right.
I was a kid. I thought, well, I was going to say I thought people lived forever, but that's not actually true, because we had a neighbor who was just 7 who lived right upstairs from us in a 2-family house, who was killed when I was 5 and Angie was 11.
Wow.
And so she and I experienced that loss really young. So I did have a real sense of mortality. But no, I was not prepared for what happened to Angie.
It sounds like, I would think you probably admired some things about her.
Oh, very much.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Well, she was beautiful and lively and funny and fashionable and
A free spirit.
free spirit. She's who I remember when I think back on my earliest memories. It's following her around the house and wanting to be just like her. But again, that too was complicated because I also was getting the message from my parents, that she was a
wasn't
bad
okay.
girl. She was a bad influence. And, she would tell me her secrets, I'd sit with her in the bathroom while she smoked her cigarettes.
That's such a sibling thing.
Right.
Here she is saying, you ever smoke one of these, I'm going to kill you.
And the fact that you knew and your parents didn't know. I mean, we know about these things about our siblings, things that our parents never find out.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I stopped learning about her life, because she was gone so much of the time. And I was more aligned with my parents. I lived at home. And, my book was really about uncovering family secrets, learning about choices my parents made that affected her, choices she made, and everything I learned, I thought, would she have told me this eventually? Would we have had that kind of closeness again that we had as small children together?
Judy, you were saying family secrets, so you felt like there were some, you identified with that with her?
Yeah, I think that, the first, I held the secret my whole life with Margie's illness. Like mental illness was taboo, so we had to keep that secret. The secret of Jane's accident, that...
What was the secret about Jane's accident?
That the car was defective. I mean, she was driving too fast, and I think that, that's what I related to the secrets, and also to being a sister, because there seems to be more losses of brothers than sisters and more books out on
You're right.
brothers than
I
on
agree with that.
sisters. So the fact that there was another sister, not that I'm not belittling any other sibling loss, don't get me wrong.
You're making a good point, and I've
and that-
noticed it over the years. I have more guests that have lost brothers.
Right.
And there's more people, compassionate friends, that have had brother deaths than
Right.
sister.
I think there are probably more
boys that die.
Right,
That's-
exactly.
yes, that's
so
why, exactly.
the sibling piece as well, but you know, what you other mentioned is like with my sister Jane, I mean, we were polar opposites. I mean, she was the party girl and I was the, you know, the quiet girl, the nerd, and, you know, kind of like, I think you and I are probably more alike than our sisters were. But then again, she was only 22, so
I
I
was going
never
to
had
ask,
the
what's the birth order? Where do you fall?
I'm right smack in the middle.
Oh, you're in the middle. Okay.
Yeah, and so typical middle child, of course. But we never had that chance to know what the relationship would have been, you know, like. I mean, but there was always love, no matter what, with sisters, you know, no matter how complicated and challenging the relationships are.
So, what would you say to somebody if I've just lost somebody? What would you say to me about my grief? What do I need to do?
I would say be kind to yourself, that if you can find just one other person, a sibling loss, and that there's really, and don't compare your loss to anybody else's. It's yours and yours alone. And whatever works for you, that's fine, you know, and whatever, if you need to go to a group or if you don't need a group, if you need to write, you need to write. You know, whatever works for you, and what works today might not work tomorrow, might not work 5 or 10 years from now, and it's okay. Just take your time and be compassionate to yourself and take time for yourself. That's what I would say.
That's excellent advice. I think an important thing to remember is that there's no wrong way to grieve, and grief looks different. You know, there's a way that we think grief is supposed to look. You know, if you're not crying, I should be crying. If you are crying, I should stop by now. And I would say just take the should out of it. You feel what you feel. Everybody has their time clock. And, you know, in some ways I feel like a cautionary tale, because I think I missed out on a lot by not allowing myself to remember my sister, which I think is part of grieving. You have to let yourself miss someone in order to feel them again.
I like that. You have to let yourself miss them in order to feel again.
Yeah, but at the same time, if that's not what's happening for you, don't be judgmental. Don't let those voices in about what it should be.
And what about the surprise of having another loss and having, I guess we call it a trigger, having that take you back to those early losses you were saying about your...
Well, I guess in a way I'm grateful, because otherwise, I mean, you know, in some ways, it opened up many doors. I did the fundraiser, I wrote the book, and it kind of brought my sisters back into my life instead of being, quote, it's a terrible word, but kind of shelved. And the hardest thing for me was losing a lot of the memories. And by writing and talking about them, more of the memories are coming back.
Well, and I'm thinking of how big you came back, and I mean, you know, you give keynotes at major conferences and do this skating and write books. I mean, you really came back and honored them in big ways.
And I just hope that doing this, I can help somebody else, that they don't feel alone in their grief as I was. And because somebody once said to me when I lost Jane that you're going to forget your sibling someday. And
People say that, and I'm
Wow.
like, the memories actually, if you relax,
They'll come
back
back.
even more, because little things trigger you.
and that haunts
Oh, that's what we did, that, or something like that. If you're, you know, and also people will get in touch with you if
Years
you're
later.
open to it. Years later, I just had somebody 40 years since my son died, and he's like, "Oh, Gloria, I was just noticing it's been 40 years since Scott died. His best friend, you know." And I'm like, "Whoa, who's that? Is this John?" And he said, "Yeah."
Well, one of Margie's
So-
friends just shared a memory how we used to have this secret foo-foo amongst my sisters. I didn't remember, and I was so touched that she remembered, and I was glad, so
Yeah.
happy to have that memory. It
Oh no,
really
what would
touched
you
me.
say to people who are surprised that they're triggered by another loss?
I think every grief contains all the other griefs. It's all connected.
What did you say? Every grief
Contains all your other griefs.
contains all the other grief. I wanted to get that, contains it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that. And sometimes when you're grieving, you're not sure who you're grieving for.
Yeah.
It starts getting complicated.
And you're probably grieving for more than one loss or for more than one reason.
Well, and I'm also thinking for all of us here, we're grieving the future that we're not going to have.
Yes.
We're going to have a future. It's going to be a different future than what we thought.
Yeah.
So if you had one piece of advice for somebody who's just had a loss, what would it be?
Just take care of yourself. And that's the hardest thing to do.
How about you, Ona? Take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself, and part of that is find your people.
Find your people. Take care of yourself.
like that.
Well, where can people get in touch with you and about what you're doing?
My website is judylipson.org, or you can get my newsletter at Substack, judylipson@substack.com.
Okay, and Ona?
I have a website, onagrits.com.
Okay, and their new book, you can get it. It's on Amazon. By the time this show comes out, it will be on Amazon. Thank you so much, ladies, for being on the show today.
Yes, thank you. You're really great examples of the fact that you can find hope after loss, because you've both had numerous losses in your lives. So thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, and we hope you all realize that it's never too late to grieve. If you've had a loss, current, grieve it. Take care of yourself. Take some of this advice. But if you've had a loss years later and you feel like you haven't visited another loss, I love the fact, Ona, that you even went out to California, videotaped, redid the whole.
Went through all the material about how your sister died and what had happened years later.
Yeah, because there may be some things where you really want to do some investigation on memories. And you went back to the ice skating rink
I love it.
and did it all over again. Well, Heidi and I want to thank everybody for joining us on the show today. And we always want to say that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.